Well, hello there, Reject Nation. Greg and John here today, and we're going to do a podcast spoiler talk for Wonder Woman 1984, a movie that John and I have not talked 1 second about together.
Nope. This will be a reaction.
A movie, just from looking all over social media, people either hate this movie or love this movie. All we can do is just be very honest about our opinions. I have literally no clue how John feels about this film. I don't think John knows how I feel. So
I have an inkling from a couple scraps I've seen around the internet.
On Twitter and stuff, yeah.
But, yeah.
So this is going to be a Q&A style. What that basically means is, like, you guys submitted some questions, and we're going to do our review mainly based off that. It's most of the questions are about Maxwell, Lord, and Cheetah, so we'll get to those pretty quick. And then some other ones, and there's some other things that we just want to talk about ourselves as well. But let's kick it off, because all we can really do right now is just be very honest with you guys about our feelings. First question of the day. Crawler G07. How did you feel about the movie? Do you think it's better than the first one? I like the movie, but I think the first one is a little bit better. I thought it was the best DC movie and the worst one simultaneously.
Anything you say is correct.
Honestly, yeah.
They got it so right. And what were they thinking?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
I was so faithful to the comics, and I didn't know what was going on. It's nothing like the source material.
I personally thought that the first one was miles better. I thought it was way, way better, the first one. But I don't want to spend this whole talk comparing it, because I think a lot of the time, you know, when you see people who, especially once we're getting mad at people who are hating on the movie, I've noticed there's the common argument of, you guys just expected to be like the first one, or you guys just couldn't accept that this was a more bright, colorful, lighthearted film. None of that was a surprise. I'm like, did you see the trailers? In fact, I don't think this movie was mismarketed. I don't think this movie was mispromoted. In fact, I'm like, no, this is pretty akin to what we got in the trailers. I was expecting a brighter, more lighthearted, more colorful film. I wasn't expecting something to feel like the first one, so that actually wasn't an issue for me. Overall, the execution, I'm honestly right now at a point of, I don't really know if I sway more to liking this movie or not liking this movie. I think there's a lot of problems, some very apparent ones. There are like isolated scenes and moments and incidences. There are things about it that I really do like a lot. Overall, I'm really confused. I think I currently sway a little bit more towards the not really liking it. There's parts I really enjoyed, though, so we'll see. Maybe by the end of this talk, I'll probably have a clear-cut idea where I ultimately land on the movie, because yeah, there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons, and I just can't tell right now if the cons are currently just outweighing the pros for me. Because I could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what, though, those pros really do shine, and I do care more about those than the cons.
Yeah. Currently, I'm in a sort of place where I feel like my feelings could evolve or change, especially pending this conversation. Generally liked it. I mean, I think came down more on the positive side than not. I do think that, yeah, there are some definite things that this movie maybe stumbles over or misses out on because it's trying to do maybe a couple too many other things. But yeah, I generally liked the direction, and I thought that, funny enough, this kind of did a reverse for me, whereas like the first Wonder Woman movie impacted me quite a bit, and on a structural level, I actually thought that movie's first 2/3 were really solid, and then there were issues I had with the final act, whereas this was the reverse. I thought the first 2/3 had a lot of stuff that was cool in them and were kind of loose in ways, and then once it got to Act 3, I was like, okay, finally I'm really feeling a lot of the stuff this movie wants me to feel. So I think in that respect, I did come out ultimately feeling like it may be a bit of a shaky landing, but it's a landing.
But that's my point. Is like you make a good point there, because the movie, to me, you could always feel that it was going somewhere. It was building to something, and by the time it got better as it went along. I can't say that for every part of the movie, which will be the very next question. But most of it, I thought, especially in terms of getting more wrapped up in the emotional beats, I thought as it progressed, it got better. So I would agree with that statement. Overall, I mean, I would agree with that. But let's move on here. When I put my post out on the community page, this was easily the most talked about one. So, Aaron R., you've been selected to give the overall thoughts here. Tell me about your thoughts on Cheetah's transformation. Well, I thought she was really the weakest part of this whole movie.
Yeah.
I don't really. I like Kristen Wiig, generally speaking. I didn't really care for her performance here. I thought the writing of her was very underdeveloped. It really did just start feeling like Amazing Spider-Man 2 to me. Like, yes, it has the similar traits of characters like Syndrome from The Incredibles, Riddler from Batman Forever, the obsessed fan who wants more, and when she had the line, "I want to be an apex predator."
Ace.
I was like, what? Where is this coming from?
Top of the food chain, baby.
This makes no sense. What are you talking about? The arc itself just doesn't make sense to me. She says, I want to be more confident. So she basically wants to be loved and appreciated by humans, by other people. So she starts getting what she wants. Everything about her arc was the most cliche comic book way it could have ever unfolded. Some people really love her, but I do find her discussion around Cheetah to be the most divisive. And I do fall on the side of, I do not like what they did with her here. When she says the Apex Predator line, I just started reflecting on the whole arc of her character of how it made no sense. She wishes to be like Diana, to be loved, to be wanted, to be appreciated, to have confidence, all these things. And she starts getting all that. She starts getting the adoration. And then suddenly she's like, fuck humans.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with them.
She gets completely suckered by Maxwell's whole thing about, why would I want more? Except we don't really get to know her character anywhere near enough to drive the motivation, of that beyond the more petty angles of, I want people to like me and I want to be popular, I want to be accepted in society. So where does this maniacal turn come from other than, I guess, just the chaos around?
I felt like the movie was trying to set it up that the sacrifice of the monkey paw effect, what Diana was saying is that, what she's losing is the good in her, the humanity.
Yeah.
I felt like they were really trying to emphasize that, so that way when she says her Apex Predator line and becomes Cheetah, they're like, that's why she lost humanity.
Well, and I think that phrase has been thrown around a lot in the popular discourse, especially in our politics here, so that might have also been a grab to be topical too.
Fair enough. I did think the Cheetah effects I like the close-up practical ones way more than I did the CGI ones.
Likewise.
But in terms of like the fight and the moment there, I just felt absolutely nothing. I felt nothing towards that moment, and it felt so shoehorned. You can't help but rewrite it in your head, and I think a lot of us did. People who are not even like involved in editing or writing, we're probably doing it ourselves of, it would have been really good if you just had her here, Barbara Minerva, and then she becomes Cheetah in the third one. That would have been way more effective. In terms of what they did here, I did start getting Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2 symptoms with her character overall. I was not a fan.
Yeah, it definitely marks something I think the movie was trying to maybe do too much with, especially when you weigh it against some of the stuff with Chris Pine. I feel like the movie kind of set up this female friendship, which is something kind of new to see on screen in this capacity, and I thought they could have made something dramatic out of that, and developed Barbara more so that when she makes her turn, it breaks our hearts more. And I did like a lot of what Kristen Wiig did, but I feel like, the script, the one consistent thing I kept griping about throughout the movie is, that's right, she's in this. Her character is going to come back at some point, and she only really serves to be a physical foil and to, kind of slow down Diana's path. And I think every, theme that's brought up through her character could have been way better explored.
I think that Cheetah is one of her biggest arch nemesis. Some people might go out there and say that she's equivalent to like Joker for Batman. So to kind of make her secondary villain on that note is kind of a lackluster, disappointing effect.
And just a victim of the circumstance of a bigger villain, And
I do think that there was so much potential to make her a wonderful villain. Even in this movie, there was opportunity within the script, I thought, where they could have made some great moments of debate.
Yeah.
Some great moments. I could give this up, but why do you get to keep this, Diana? How come you're the one? If I retract my wish, how come you get to still have your powers and stuff just because you were born with this, but yet I don't? There could have been so many interesting arguments to be had, but it's just kind of one note.
And there's a lot of feelings that could have come out of it if they had developed their friendship beyond that one dinner lunch that they go to, because again, I thought they had promising chemistry.
I thought there was a lot of missed opportunity, and overall wasn't a fan. But I do want to talk about a part where I was a fan, segueing us to the next part. Galaxy Eyes PD, what did you think of Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord character and his arc? He is the best part of the movie.
Absolutely.
Undoubtedly, he is the best part of the movie. I loved everything he did. He hit the right note. You immediately thinking of something. For me, I was thinking, oh yeah, kind of like a Patrick Bateman 1980s excess type of character, American Psycho vibe about him. But then you find out that, oh, this is really just a front. This is a mask that he puts on because he's a guy really in a lot of pain. And I thought that was like a pretty bold choice to make for your main villain, to bring him a lot of humanity. But every single layer of Maxwell Lord, and I loved watching Pedro Pascal just slowly lose his sanity over the course of the movie and just fall apart. Like, and he brought so much physically to a role that where you might not expect it, and more than just the makeup of the eye and the sweat. Like, his nerves are just shaking. By the end, he's like talking to the president. He's just trying to keep it all together, and he is the embodiment of excess and more. And I didn't know it until this movie, but I think Donald Trump's a bad guy.
Oh, and what?
I think Donald Trump's bad. I think the movie finally taught me that.
Wait a minute. There's allusions to Trump in this movie? Where? Next you're going to tell me like a wall pops up somewhere during the film.
I was watching it going, I think Donald Trump's bad.
Oh, no. Like some entertainer guy who's like, full of it, but tries to swindle everyone around him and convince them of more, but really he's not selling them anything, and then some random stroke of luck sends him up the ladder? Wow. I wouldn't have thought of it.
I did not draw the parallel until the credits started rolling.
No, until they put that dedication to like thank you to Donald Trump and his pictures in the credits. That's the mid-credit scene, is they thank him for the inspiration directly.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. It was a little on the nose there with the Trumpisms.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's because everyone, depending on who's president, often that if there's a president in a movie or some character like that, we go, oh, this is a reflection of like Bush. This is a reflection of Clinton. This is a reflection of that. I don't think it's audience projection onto it. I think it's pretty apparent.
It's definitely made to harmonize with our times and create dissonance with our times too. Although I honestly didn't get too distracted by that during the movie. I wasn't sitting there going, they're beating me over the head with Trumpisms. Like I get it. And the movie's also about truth. Or lack thereof.
I mean, he's not doing a Trump impression at all. There are things about him, and there's more to him than that. I mean, he cares about his child.
Yeah.
He cares about Alistair. That's the one thing about his arc. This is what I mean. I'm kind of back and forth because it was so predictable. Then the reason it was so predictable that it was going to go that route was because the kid's not a character
at all.
He's just like
he's a prop.
Have any dialogue besides "Daddy"?
A big neon sign pointing at that character.
Yeah. This like every time he's on screen, just Pedro Pascal does not shut the fuck up, and he just keeps talking while this kid never gets any lines.
I was half expecting his wish to be some dialogue and development as a character, and then you sit there going, "Well, is that a detractor, or is this just a illustration of how unconcerned with the kid's actual feelings and well-being the character Max Lord is?"
I mean, I felt like right away he really cares about his kid.
Yeah,
it wasn't some Disney thing of I want to work, forget you, son. But he really seemed like he cared about his kid.
But it did remind me of that in a sense because it is like I'm working my ass off and I'm running this operation that's clearly not on the up and up, and that desperate father energy is there.
Yeah, I don't know how I really felt about its overall conclusion. I want to get more into the script later because of how it pertains to Maxwell Lord in the handling of the execution. But if we're talking solely about his arc, Pedro Pascal, and that was one of the moments that brought me to tears. Even though I could give two shits about this kid.
I know.
I was like, man, but that dude, when you put him with a child, that Pedro Pascal can bring you to tears, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I thought his performance was terrific. He really sold everything, especially the makeup. Like the worse physically he looks, his performance is right in line with that. And I feel like you could easily cross into chewing on scenery, and I thought he managed to have fun with this, but also, give it a really compelling performance. And whenever he was on screen, whatever the situation, were some of the times I was most engaged and involved. And I like that they went with a villain that isn't as clear cut as just like, I'm gonna come in and destroy the city. It's a more appealing and insidious operation, especially with how it lures everyone on Earth in, which I thought was really clever. Like the actual mechanics of his character aside in terms of the sci-fi stuff, just his motivations and what he grew into, I really appreciated. And that was a nice contrast from the previous movie because, you know, when Ares is revealed, it's a bit like, oh, okay, he's just a big bad guy, we gotta fight now. And so this was a bit different and it had more ideology, so I appreciated that.
I think it would have been better if it was just Maxwell Lord and if it was just Maxwell Lord as the main villain and you didn't have Cheetah. And every time he was on screen, I could care less about anyone else in the movie.
What is this guy gonna do?
All right, let's move on. So we got Steve Trevor now to talk about. We got a couple of questions here. I'm going to lead with this one first. Steve's return, was it really necessary? From Wesley. Here's where I'm so conflicted on the Steve Trevor and Diana Prince stuff. It goes without saying, their chemistry is still top-notch. Chris Pine is still so damn great in the role, undoubtedly. But I did find myself going, why am I not caring that much about him being here? Don't get me wrong. That moment where... And I want to talk a little bit about Gal Gadot in between all this too. That moment where he does, you know, finally convince Diana, like, you gotta let me go. You gotta let me go again. you know? And then when she's walking away, I thought the way that was executed was wonderful. Like, she's crying, you're feeling the intensity of it. I started getting misty-eyed. I wasn't like swelling with tears, but I started getting misty-eyed at the situation.
You catch his final words to her before she says, I love you back. Like, it's a good moment. Yeah,
especially when you have subtitles on HBO Max. Makes it a lot easier to like really pick up on all that. And it was a really great scene, and I thought both of them really knocked it out of the park in that moment. But overall was where I had some issues, and I think I finally pinpointed why I wasn't really caring as much is because he's not a real character in this movie. He's someone who doesn't have an arc. He's just kind of there. He shows up like, what am I doing here? I need to find out what brought me here. I shouldn't be here. Like, that's his whole arc. And he doesn't feel all that integral to it. So while they're doing the flipperoo of the fish out of water with like, wow, look at the 80s, freaking weird. If you compare it to the first one, that is still driving the plot forward, where she is about like she has a very specific idea of what humanity is, and then she's like getting thrusted into this world where she kind of thinks she's better than everyone, and then when she's viewing humanity, she's like, wow, this is beautiful. It's like emotional and moving, where here it's just kind of funny. And sometimes I thought like the jokes kind of fell a little flat, even especially that montage moment with the trying on clothes. I was like, man, this is going on way too long. This is not funny.
This looked funnier in the trailer.
Yeah, this was really funny in the trailer, but damn, I would have been fine with this being a deleted scene. Like, this is not that funny in the movie with the pacing. It's not really working. So I didn't find his character all that necessary for here because he's not a real character. He doesn't really have an arc to go through. Whereas in the first one, both of them do, and their storylines work like that. Where here they don't. That's where my conflict is. I like Chris Pine. I like their chemistry. Man, I like that final scene with them together. But overall, it just didn't feel all that essential for him to be in here.
Yeah, and I think it's got, at least for me, because I've been chewing on this, partly to do with the way they introduce him, because they kind of set up an immediate set of stakes and also an immediate idea as to what the resolution will be when he shows up. And I thought it was cool that they kept this very wraps in the trailer, but, you know, they introduce him, he's looking in the mirror, realizing he's a different person, he's in a different person's body. The second that happens, I feel like, at least in my brain, I was going, okay, this just isn't going to last. It can't. And so I feel like if you had maybe saved that twist, made it a twist and saved it for later or some kind of thing, I don't know exactly how that would work, but I feel like it might have at least lulled you in a little bit better than going, oh, already here's an explanation for how this is working that we can also see a direct exit out of.
Yeah.
You know, and so... yeah, and it makes that moment at the end between her and the other guy cute and stuff, but ultimately, yeah, I liked their scenes while they were on, but when he disappears, yeah, he doesn't really factor into anything with Max Lord or anything with Cheetah. You know? And so, yeah.
And I kind of felt like there were some things that I appreciated kind of humanizing Gal Gadot a little bit more here. Like before Steve showed up, she really sold that loneliness quality to her. I thought she did an excellent job on that, and I thought her performance here was pretty strong. There were parts where I was kind of in conflict of, I feel like she would have drawn the conclusion of,
I'm gonna have to let this
I'm gonna have to let you go, not Steve Trevor telling me to do it. And then I just started getting out of my own head in certain parts during this movie, and this is a really personal, subjective thing, but all I can do is be honest. You mean to tell me this iconic, independent, female warrior woman. What does this say about people who really, because I know some people who have like lost their boyfriends, like who have died, or their husbands who have died. It's been 45 years or something, and she's still so hung up on this that she can't move on. The fact that she doesn't make the choice, like there's power in that, but then I also get kind of pulled out of, but you're also Wonder Woman.
This feels uniquely.
You've had a lot of life experiences and you can't get over it.
This feels uniquely like a situation you would much earlier be able to see the workings of and be able to realize that you're earlier on than she does, that you're going to have to let this go.
Versus the like 45 years in the making here of all these experiences.
Yeah, it doesn't really convince you that this can last or that it is natural in any way.
And I also did have some issues with the fact that it wasn't her concluding here. It was the soul of Steve Trevor telling her to do that, because I felt like Wonder Woman would do it. But here's my real thing that was distracting me, and the Ponderer brought this question up, and it was a major distraction the entire time I was watching it, which is, how do you feel about the fact that Diana and Steve use another man's body to have sex without his consent? Okay. Everything about this was so distracting to me, because when they first do it, I'm like, oh, they're kind of doing that Hunt for Red October thing where like, oh, he's not really speaking Russian. I mean, he's speaking Russian. He's not. But they're putting it in English. I'm like, oh, so he's in a different guy's body. And then there are issues like, yes, the sexual part. Like to me, it didn't read as cute when the guy shows up, because I'm like, dude, does this guy have any recollection that Diana like totally slept with him?
It's okay though, because she's super hot and she's Wonder Woman, so he should be pleased.
Right.
He should be so excited right now, bro. He should ask for a number on the spot.
Like, to me, it was kind of funny, because I'm like, well, you can't funny, but then there's also the other context. Well, you kind of took advantage of this guy's body.
And what about the people in his life?
Right. And the other part to me was like, you guys seem to show no concern for taking over this guy's body
and stealing his clothes.
Yeah, no concern.
Being in his house.
Like, this dude, just you were in not one conversation of this debate was, look, I just can't take over this guy's body. This is not right. I can't live like this. This is wrong to do this to this person, whoever he is. It's messed up. No one says that. They could care less about taking, like, he's insignificant. You're Steve Trevor and I'm Wonder Woman.
And for a while I was wondering if how much she could tell or not, because there's a piece of dialogue where they at least acknowledge it together, but I was like, did she know immediately, or did you have to break this news? I wish I could have seen that part.
I could see it within Diana's character too, though, to see past the physicality, just to see within the soul. So actually, I will give the movie credit that, you know, like in other works of film or whatever, I might be distracted by that. I'm like, but the guy doesn't look like Steve Trevor. He's a totally different guy. But with Diana Prince, I'm like, no, she could see past the physicality and see the soul of Steve Trevor. So I appreciated that approach. But there's all this other context around there. I'm like, this movie couldn't give two shits about acknowledging it.
Again, without taking that further than it goes and without exploring it deeper than it goes, it does become one of these areas where you're like, parts of this are really charming, but also I don't know how this fits overall.
Yeah, so I'm really back and forth. It's one of those things. I like Chris Pine. I like Steve Trevor. That's why I enjoy it when it's there, but I didn't have anywhere near the level of effect I was hoping it would have, and I ultimately didn't find his presence to be 100% necessary. Does it go to serve the themes of not cheating in life, of dealing with reality and learning to appreciate the truth in the moment of today?
And wanting what you do have?
Yeah, does it go to serve that? Yes. But he is also a main character in here. And ultimately, as a character journey, he doesn't feel all that essential.
No, that feels like a note.
Yeah.
Can we get Steve? Can we figure out a way to get Steve back in here? People loved Steve last time.
It kind of does feel
And
that
now
way.
I'm like, what are we going to do for part 3 when they want Steve back? Are we going to just do flashbacks? Or are we going to resurrect him again?
We're done with Steve Trevor. All right, so next one we got on the list is a man named Rocky. What did you think about the overall direction of the writing? I'm going to slightly change your question to be direction and writing, just so we can cover a lot of bases here. There's a lot of more specific questions that we have more to go through in a bit, but we'll give some basic thoughts. I never could get behind it since it all felt kind of messy. Yeah, I mean, that is a big part of my conflict with this movie. Is it got better as it went. I do think the writing really was not that great. I thought it was just in the first 5 minutes of this movie. I'm like, God damn, you're really hammering in the themes here as much as possible.
That page 5, state the theme.
So first we start off with a narration from Diana.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start off with going to Connie Neos and talking about more themes. And then we're going to end it with more themes.
And we're going to show you a depiction of the theme before doing it again for the whole movie. And every time we talk about the themes, we're going to take the art part out of the dialogue.
And that's a big part of what kind of hindered some of the Maxwell Lord scenes, too. In terms of the finale moment, I love that they did do the reveal of she's really talking to all the people. You know, because at first I'm like, man, this is way over the top. You're really overdoing it with your motivational speech here, Diana.
Maybe just cool your heart on that sleeve there.
But then when you realize she's talking to all the people, you're like, all right, I'll let it go. All right, yeah. She's talking to everyone. She's got to talk to the world. You got to be expositional here in this moment. You know, so that did click. That did make sense. But overall, I thought the writing, it was very not subtle. But here's where I go back and forth with the movie in terms of the direction, because there were direction and writing combined, because I feel like they really go hand in hand in this movie. At times, it really did feel like I was watching an 80s movie. I didn't know where that was like, oh, it feels messy and faulty because it's portraying an 80s movie. Because it wasn't like an 80s tribute movie. You know, there's like no 80s music in here. They don't do any of those things. Like they make fun of the 80s. There's a difference when you see something like Stranger Things, which is like, look at the 80s.
Look how great
at the 80s
were.
You know what I'm talking about.
I forgot this was in the 80s half the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's more dealing with more of the things that were the resonance of fear during the 80s and the problems during the 80s, more than it is about highlighting the cool 80s side, you know, the nostalgia of that. So when they were capturing the movie, there were times where I was like, this does feel like a movie I would have seen in the 80s, not a movie that is paying tribute to the 80s. I don't know if I'm clear about it, but I hope you guys get what I'm saying. So there were times where with the way it was scripted, the way it was directed, and especially with certain CGI moments that did not click with me, where I was like, but is this intentional? I can't tell if it's intentional. I'll be way more accepting of it. But there are times where I'm like, I don't know if this is intentional. And that's where I thought it was kind of tonally all over the place, and pacing wise too, because I thought there were too many characters. I thought there was too much story going on. I didn't really have enough time to really feel for a lot of what was happening.
There was a lot of intermittence, because I would find that occasionally a scene would happen where I'm like, oh dang, they're actually allowing this scene to breathe. And I think that's one of the benefits of the runtime, is while there's a lot happening in this movie, I've seen a lot of other movies where more is happening in the same amount of time, and it feels even more disjointed. So I feel like the direction I liked more than the writing. I thought it at least did a lot to keep the energy going. It had a lot of those earmarks of the 80s, especially when you're like in the mall, a lot of those like moving dolly shots and like you're looking over the rails and things. Like I thought the energy was there, and the writing was this inconsistent thing where every time they wanted to talk about the themes, it would peel back the artifice. It felt kind of Frankenstein-y, or like I was flipping through a graphic novel where like all of a sudden there are a few pages from a different story here, and then there are a few pages from this other story here. And so like there are a bunch of isolated moments and scenes and themes I liked with pretty much every character, and I feel like everything was there in this movie. And ultimately it comes down to there's just certain things that aren't developed as well as they could be, or again the script is trying to juggle certain things where, again, especially with Barbara Minerva, it doesn't feel very interested in developing her beyond some of the more broadly reaching things like with being harassed and stuff like that are a bit more universal, and that Diana is also subject to. So it's a movie with a lot on its mind that I really admired. I do appreciate that it spent a lot more, like it breathed like a film to me in the sense that it didn't seem like they were economically plopping action sequences in. So it's like there's a lot about what this movie was going for in terms of its shape that I do appreciate and think is a good step in the right direction, but overall it's a real mixed bag of executions.
I would the action scene stuff, I kind of agree and I kind of disagree, because what I really noticed is let's take I forget which part of the Middle East they went to, wherever the car chase scene was, when they're trying to get Maxwell Lord. And the choreography of it, other than like some weird slow-mo running shots of Gal Gadot where she just looks dead on the inside.
Fast running is not an easy
But
trick.
you know those like close-up ones on her?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, that does not look good.
Yeah, you don't look like you're engaged in this activity.
But the action scenes, I thought the choreography, and I thought it was exciting, and I thought it really was cool to look at. I thought it was like, yeah, this is good. Yet I noticed the emotional weight of the action scenes. None of them were really felt. And you can't help but compare that to the first Wonder Woman. I think this is a part 2 after all. When you think about action scenes in the first Wonder Woman, there's so much more emotional resonance to them. Whereas here I did find myself going, this choreography wise, visual, this is really cool. But yet there's a missing tension, and there's a missing stakes, and there's a missing emotional drive here that I'm not really feeling in any of the action scenes. I mean, especially with the Barbara Minerva Cheetah fight, which was one that I felt like this is the reason Cheetah's here, is to have this fight.
To have physical fights.
Yeah.
And that is one drawback to a less physical villain, you know?
The action looks cool. The mall fight was a little jarring in the way it was captured, but it felt like a Superman movie or something like it felt like a classic superhero movie to me. So I get what they were going for there. The invisible jet scene,
Yeah. I like that scene a lot.
I enjoy. I mean, I'm so back and forth on almost every scene here because one of the issues I really have with the script is it's one of the most convenience-driven plots I've ever seen in a movie. Everything is so conveniently placed for them. Like right down, and Maxwell Lord showing up to the president, and be like, "What's all this? What did I just stumble on here?
Did you create a way to get exactly what I need done?
What is this? You know,
This is ideal.
or they show up at the plane like the
nobody's
jet
here,
is full of
but
fuel
then there
enough
are
to get you
all these
across
guys
the world.
who are suddenly being attentive now that you've turned the plane on.
Yeah, I'm like, why is this plane full of gas here on the runway? And it's just enough to get them
You
across
never
the world.
know. It was ready to go out in the morning.
But there was a lot of those scenes. There was a lot in this movie where it's just conveniently placed for them. Everything is just conveniently placed. That kind of trope does bother me when it's like there's lack of investigation or lack of problem solving.
When you don't feel like you're earning the deductions and you're earning the next step of the adventure. Yeah.
And, I think a lot of it tries to be forgiven by its tone of like, no, it is more of a fun, lighthearted one, which it is. Like I said,
it gets heavy.
I'm so back and forth on so much of it. Like Bathroom Boys, he's asking, did you feel it was incomplete somehow? When I finished watching, I felt like something was missing, but I can't place it. And I left with that feeling of the film of, I don't get this. This movie's 2.5 hours long. And yet I constantly am left with this feeling of, I wanted a little bit more emotional resonance out of almost every plot point here.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's weird. I sat there relishing in the emotional resonance that was there and being like, man, these scenes are good. But yeah, like at the totality of the movie, you are like, I wish they had focused on this and maybe, taken some plot points out or some distractions out. And I think that's partly what it is there are some great scenes, but now I'm thinking back and I'm like, this invisible jet moment, as cool as I thought that was and as touching as I thought aspects of that scene were, I don't really think it helps or adds anything. The plane disappears. It never comes back.
It never disappears, and like I said, it's another convenient moment because there's nothing foreshadowing the fact that she's been learning this ability.
Yeah.
It's just like, convenience. I've been learning an ability. First time I'm ever gonna, like, the lines were funny of like cup of coffee and I couldn't find it again. Like, that's a funny line. But then the fact that she just happens to like, okay, I could buy it, is just such a convenient moment.
Part of it too for me was I feel like they did something so nice in creating a villain and a threat that is bigger than one person and that does start to suck in the whole world. And one thing I appreciated was that they did, at least at points, clue you into like how much this is affecting the citizens and also playing on their desires. And I feel like the movie does in some ways slight itself by taking Diana kind of away from all that and putting her, like, you need a personal story for her to contend with. But again, splitting that attention between Barbara and Steve Trevor, I think also kind of hampers some of the potential that could have brought to the overall scenario, as well as the Maxwell Lord scenario, and to the overall theme, so that when every time you check in on the theme, it doesn't have to be so on the nose.
Yeah.
You know?
Skywalker 501 first is asking, what did you guys think of the movie's classic Christopher Reeve Superman feel that Patty Jenkins was going for? I mean, yeah, she really doubled down for him. Like, she was very obvious that the first Wonder Woman, there's a scene that's clearly aped from the first Superman movie. And then here, that immediately allowed me to be a little bit more forgiving for certain parts. So I'm like, okay, I get what she's going for. Like, especially just with the first title smash of WW84. Like, oh yeah, this feels like a Superman movie right away. But here we go again. There are times where I thought it really worked. Matter of fact, I loved the whole thing with her learning how to do aerial movements, be in the sky, use the weather. Like, I like how that came back with Steve Trevor talking about the ability of flight. It's all about feeling. Yeah. And I really love that. And there were some of the CGI where I thought it looked pretty good, other times looked a little off. But in terms of the emotional context of it, I very much loved how they did that. And that's how she like finds where Cheetah and Maxwell Lord are. I just zipping through the sky. I'm like, don't you have the power to get an invisible jet?
Yeah, where'd you put that? Clearly, you weren't visible while you were sitting in it, so it would be a very effective tool. And apparently, it's quieter that way.
Faster to go that way?
I don't know.
So anyway, but then there were times where I'm like, okay, this is some parts that start feeling like Superman 2. That's fine. Superman 2 is not a bad movie, you know, especially with her, and like Spider-Man 2 does it too, where she's like losing some of her powers, and I thought that was a really good element to include in here because it does raise the stakes. Where, you know, like I did find more tension in that White House scene because I'm like, oh shit, she could get injured, even though the rules are kind of on and off again here of when she has super strength and when she can get injured.
This is a slow release drawback to this wish.
There were times where I was
slow release monkey paw.
But then there were times it starts feeling like Superman 3 and then Superman 4. I'm like, oh shit, why are you starting to feel like the bad Superman movies?
Just tribute them all. Tribute everyone.
It started feeling like all the Superman movies, including the bad ones. And that's where thematically I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There are times where it really clicks, and there are times where it starts feeling like some of the bad ones.
Yeah.
Let me skip ahead to this one really quick since we've been kind of touching on it. Was Brown-Eyed Black Sheep's asking, was the golden armor required? Oh God, you know, like the introduction of that scene first off was just like, of course, like the way it was handled, just like the weakest script storytelling of the most. I mean, if you've seen the trailer, you know it's going to come into play. But if you haven't seen the trailer, you're like, well, she's definitely wearing that in a little bit. Like, what's this? Ooh, gold.
You mean this random flashback of mythology that's central to Themysciran culture didn't just flow right into the movie?
Well, it probably would have been cooler if that was your opening scene.
Yeah.
If you did that opening scene first and add more at stake, it would have been cooler. So I wasn't a fan of how they introduced that. We will talk about the post-credit scene later because I felt that made it better, the post-credit scene. Yeah. And when she uses the golden armor, by the time she's using it, see, from watching the trailer and then the movie just telling you that she's going to be wearing this at some point in the movie, and the fact that she was losing her powers, I started going, that's smart. Okay. Yeah. Because she's not going to be as strong. So she's going to need the golden armor suit to take on Cheetah and Maxwell Lord. Like, she's going to need this suit. But then she gets her powers back.
and the suit doesn't really amount to much. I mean, she protects herself with the wings for a little bit, and
she's
then
like, fuck this is unnecessary.
You know what? Let's just go with good old-fashioned physics and get some electricity going in here, and that should do the trick. And I guess that won't affect me at all.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's what protected her in the water, I suppose. But no,
it'd be a conductor.
But overall, right? But overall, the golden armor, the fact that she got her powers back already, so that's where the conflict comes in, because it would have just been a double beat from the first movie to this if she let go of Steve Trevor at the very end again. Then it would have just been like, well, that's what they did in Wonder Woman 1. So the fact that they placed it earlier in this movie was smart in terms that you're not just drawing the exact comparison. It's feeling different from the first Wonder Woman movie. The double beat of saying goodbye is not as apparent or obvious. With that, though, because she gets her powers back already, suddenly it's like, well, what the fuck do you need the golden armor? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like for something as significant as that, it really starts, like, the second it turned up in the movie, I had this thought of, like, really? You're going to use it for this? And I don't want to, spend too much time on what I would have done, but they set it up as this thing that protected this, original warrior from just a horde of soldiers.
Spartan warriors.
Yeah, and so I was thinking to myself, partly during that, I was like, oh, yeah, if the world's going crazy, maybe this is a protective measure. Like, she doesn't want to strike out against all these innocent people who are falling prey to this. Maybe this will lead to some kind of very powerful just act of, I'm just going to protect myself from the circumstances as I go find the source. But yeah, it ultimately just turns into a clever or just a plot-oriented way to make up for the earlier stakes of her not having her powers. And then, yeah, it's weird. It looked like it would be such a triumphant moment, and that was actually kind of some of my least favorite action was with that suit and the way it was, just sort of used.
Yeah. Oh, well. Let's move on here. Chase Gardner, what did you guys think of the ending theme of giving up the things you want most in life to make the hard decision to make things better in your own life and the closest people around you? I feel like you found a very clear-cut theme. The theme isn't like, to me, the message and theme was kind of like a whole lot of things.
You gotta live in and accept the truth and
make the most out of the reality in your present moment.
Yeah, appreciate the things that you do have. More is not always more.
I mean, the thing with this question, I feel like this is a pretty good boiler point of it.
Yeah.
Look, of course I like the theme.
Yeah.
Of course it's a great
I like
theme.
what the movie's going for.
Of course I like the message.
Absolutely.
How much of an asshole would I be like, screw that? You should have kept Steve around.
Fantasy for everyone.
Maxwell could have had whatever he wanted.
Don't
so
achieve.
unrealistic, stupid.
Just wish things into reality and never grow.
I mean, that's a big part of what I liked about it, because at one point Maxwell Lord is kind of touching on things of, especially living out in places like LA where they're really big on things like law of attraction and all that, positive thinking. But there's also the difference of wishful thinking, where all you gotta do is think about it, and then I should be able to get it. Which is not what that's really all about.
It's not want driven, which this character very much is.
Like, to me, Maxwell Lord felt like a Tales from the Crypt kind of tale.
Yeah,
it felt like it was that sort of thing of like, ooh, yeah, you get this great thing, but you start taking advantage, and there's this tragic element to it that he could have just fallen to his ultimate demise out of excess and power.
Yeah,
I like the ending note of what they did with him. It's like, if it wasn't such an obvious arc that they were headed to from that kid's first scene, then it really would have hit better. I was moved to tears at that point. It would have hit better. But in terms of the theme, what they explored, that was an issue that I kind of have with it, though. I felt like they really needed to be very expositional, so we got the theme. That was the issue I had with it, was I didn't feel like they needed to be like so on the nose or wildly expositional for us to get the theme of the movie. There was some expositional stuff in the first Wonder Woman to get the themes down of the characters and the learning lessons. They're nowhere near as ham-fisted and punched up as they are here, which fits for an 80s movie. At the same time, though, there was things about the way it was handled of, I feel like it's relying so much on telling me, and so I'm actually not feeling it as much.
Yeah.
Because there's so much monologuing to the camera about this. Or I'm like, just let me feel it for a second. Show, not tell everything,
Yeah, and I feel like that's also a place where the movie kind of gets maybe split in who it's trying to aim at, too. Because part of me was thinking, and I think it's absolutely fair to aim at younger audiences, because superheroes were originally intended for young people to read.
Sure.
But yeah, there are times in which it feels like it could be more sophisticated in just showing us and giving us the credit enough to understand what they're going for, instead of like matter-of-factly making sure periodically we check back in on the theme in case you forgot. And I feel like if you find yourself in a position where you need to do that, you probably have a little too much going on.
Yeah. And the theme is really in conjunction with the character of Wonder Woman, exploring like love, compassion,
truth.
All those qualities are things that are so in tune with Wonder Woman. So using this theme as a backdrop for the characters of the movie, and to try to have those characters fulfill that, where Cheetah feels very out of place, and have all the characters fulfill that.
And I had a great thing about sisterhood or something in there. Come on.
I like the theme. I just I thought that there was parts about conveying that theme throughout that I thought could have hit the feels a little bit harder. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. Olivia Rogers, I just want to talk about this super brief. How would you describe the rules of the Dreamstone? I noticed touches of inconsistency. Yeah. I couldn't get going back to Steve Trevor. I couldn't get past the fact of why didn't he just come back from the dead?
Yeah, how what forces in the universe accounted for like, oh, can't have people like disappearing or popping up. We got to keep the same number of people, so this guy's just going to transform.
Yeah, because I'm like, shit just keeps appearing left and right in this world. Like the guy with the cows and the or the wall. Like they're it's like inanimate objects are the things that are able to appear, but people they can't just bring back. Like, why does the soul take over this?
And when things go back to normal, like certain debris remains, other debris just goes reverse and disappears entirely.
Yeah. There were parts of it that were a little bit confusing to me, and then to me, this whole thing with the Dreamstone kind of it is one of those things that makes me think about the DCEU continuity of all this crazy shit happened in 1984. Is any of this going to ever be brought up?
Or is everyone going to remember it like an awful dream of some kind?
I don't think so. I think they remember it.
It
right?
certainly seems
like
that's the read I got.
It.
Yeah. They didn't specify that nobody remembers it, and afterwards, I mean, yeah, especially on that last moment between Wonder Woman and that guy.
Yeah.
It certainly seems as though he was at least, and the rest of the world was affected in the aftermath.
And just to clarify, I did see a few people ask, like, why is it that Cheetah was able to get 2 wishes? And I thought the movie made that clear. He makes a wish, people make a wish, and he gets something in return. He declares what he wants in return. And in the midst of that teleprompter telecasting that he was doing, he said in return give her the rage and aggression she desires. So he like converted one of his in returns to give to her.
God, yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Because they do at one point say something like, you get 1 wish or whatever.
No, she even questions it.
Yeah.
So he used it to his advantage
that's
in the return and pointed. And I feel like that can go over people's heads, but I thought the movie did have a line of dialogue that was like, oh, okay, that's where it is.
At first I was worried at the end when the kid was like, I wished you'd come back and I knew you would, and I was like, when did you do that though? because what if this is just a symptom of the thing all over again?
Well, I mean, he said his actual wish was, I wish I could have your greatness.
Your greatness, yeah.
But does that come into the fold here?
I thought
he was going to represent some greater side of him.
Or something.
Or like become evil or one of the...
No, just take all of the good parts of Maxwell Lord, thus making him even more bitter.
But that's what I mean. Is like, what they didn't do anything with that wish. It seemed like such a high stakes moment of like, okay, what did this kid's wish
take the power from him?
Did this mess things up? But it didn't do anything.
Didn't affect anything.
No, that's I mean, it's a real plot hole.
Yeah,
it's a real flaw with the movie.
Yeah,
let's send it off with this. Might as well save the post credit scene for the end. How do we feel about the after credit scene? I'd like to hear your opinions. Well, I mean, that's the scene where Linda Carter, they reveal she's Asteria. I knew it was going to be Linda Carter. I'm like, that's obviously not Gal Gadot. It's going to be Linda Carter.
Bring it in from the girl from the pilot that didn't get picked up.
But then to do the Asteria character, I was like, oh, sweet. That's cool. It was her. Then I just opened up a bunch of questions. Like, she just abandoned everyone after that.
So she's just chilling on planet Earth, just incognito.
She just left. She's like,
does she know where the armor is?
Like, yeah, exactly. I'm like,
does she keep track?
She Boba Fett now? Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, in part 3, she's gonna turn up. She's gonna be like, all I want is my armor.
Yeah.
That's what we have to look forward to, and then they can have some kind of civil war. Wonder Women.
I mean, the fact of the Easter egg of, if you don't know it's Linda Carter, like some people, I bet there are some people who don't know, like, oh, that's who played Wonder Woman originally. If you don't know that, it probably does not much for you, because you probably don't really care as much about the Asteria character being there, and they didn't play it like an ominous moment. They played it like a fun, tongue-in-cheek Easter egg. Yeah, of it was actually Linda Carter the whole time. Mm-hmm. But then in terms of plot, I was like, are they going to make this? That could open up the door for the future of like Wonder Woman 3, you have Asteria and Wonder Woman in a movie together, and that would be cool to get Gal Gadot and Linda Carter co-starring in a film together. That would be really cool to get the original Wonder Woman in there as a different person. It just did open up questions for me that it's like, wait a minute, she just abandoned everyone?
So you just saved these 2 kids. Who did you save during all this stuff that just happened? Where were you? Were you here? Did you know? Were you on Earth? Because if you're on Earth, you must have known.
Anyway, guys. In conclusion, I thought it was all right.
It's pretty all right.
That's all I
enjoyed myself.
That's my honest opinion. I'm not trying to ride any even keel line here. Like, when it was done, I was like, it was okay. And that's where I'm at. Like, it was okay. It's got a lot of flaws. But the thing is, I wasn't waiting for it to end. I wasn't bored. and I wasn't annoyed. And if you do any of those qualities, because even though I do think the film's a little too long, which is bizarre to me, but even if you do one of those qualities, if one of those qualities I feel are really really resident for me, bored or annoyed, then I'd probably be like really swaying to, even like with Cheetah, finding her very unnecessary. I was never bored, and I wasn't like waiting for it to end. And in fact, there was a part of me that was a little bummed when it was over, just because I'm like, oh, Wonder Woman's over, you know?
Yeah. I had a lot of fun. Everything that popped up, whether it was over or underutilized, had something I enjoyed about it. So yeah, I had a good time, and there were some moments where I was either having a really fun time or was crying about something. So I do appreciate that even in an uneven experience like this, it still managed to grip me with a few things that were very potent, and yeah, I really liked the overall of what they were going for with Maxwell Lord quite a bit.
Yeah, I didn't.
I
didn't feel much when I was watching it, but I was like amused throughout. That
just
was
the idea.
That was it.
Though.
I was amused,
this
but
thing
I didn't feel much.
Everyone on Earth is going to take advantage of, just like the implications of that.
I mean,
More
that is a great
execution.
sequence, and that's a scary scenario resolved by something that's super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Well, that too. I was like, oh, so all you have to do is just say I recant my wish, and now there are no consequences.
Yeah, I'm like, you don't have to go through. I must have missed that detail because I was like, oh, you got to kill Maxwell Lord to stop this, right? You got to kill Maxwell Lord. That's the conflict she has. And then I was like, oh, you just got to say, I take it back.
And being that he is the originator of this whole situation, does the stone show back up, or is it just destroyed?
I think it's just destroyed at this point. It would mess up the whole thing. All right, guys. Well, Wonder Woman 1984, what did you think of the movie? Leave your thoughts down below. You can subscribe to The Real Rejects. Click that notification bell. Hit the like button if you liked our review. Hit the like button if you disagree with us. Hit the like button just because you like hitting like buttons. See you guys soon. Happy New Year.